Joined now by our insider, Tim May of 97.1 The Fan and Letterman Row. Tim, every year spring practice is important, but maybe this year is a little more important given two reasons. A, they didn't have one last year. As Ryan Day points out, this is their real first spring practice in 2 years. And secondly, they're coming in with three kids. One of them is going to be a quarterback, but we don't know who it's going to be.
Yeah, for just what you said, but it's not just the quarterback, man. They're filling in some huge holes, are doing some real shuffling on the defensive side of the ball. And we all know when you really got right down to it last year, if there was a true disappointment in that team, it's the way it played defense, especially in that last game of the year, especially in pass defense. You end up number 122 in the nation. That's not good. And I'm talking about in pass defense, but you're right. I mean, the bottom line is I think they have a real quarterback brouhaha that's going to be going on in spring from what I'm hearing. And these guys, all three of these guys are talented. You would think CJ Stroud might have the lead going into the spring just based on the pecking order you saw at the end of the season last year. But Jack Miller III, and then the McCord kid out of Pennsylvania, they both got talent. You saw Miller flash a little bit last year early in the season. So yeah, I mean, this is wide open. You and I were discussing before we started this. There've been a lot of good quarterback battles, but you go back to the Dwayne Haskins, JT Burrow battle just a couple of years ago. A lot of things shake out, man. Once you name a number one quarterback, number one, it tells you who the leader of that team's going to be for the next year. Number two, it tells you there might be some guys looking elsewhere as the thing goes on. So this is going to be interesting. I don't think it's going to be settled maybe until early in the season next year.
Tim, in talking to Ryan Day, he told me that, they have a total of 15 practices, but he said, we can't do this the way we normally do. We have to make each practice count. We have to make each one some kind of competition because we got to shake out. We've got to test these guys at the quarterback position. I mean, yeah. What do you think you do? What do you do to bring that competition so that you can kind of put these kids under fire? Because that's what they're going to attempt to do.
Nothing tells you how good a quarterback is truly until you're playing in games. So what you do as a coaching staff is, as Ryan Day pointed out several weeks ago, what you do as a coaching staff is you try to create game-like situations in your practices to get maybe a jump start on that. The great thing about football anymore, about college football programs anymore, is these guys are in great shape going into spring. They don't really need any acclimatization, even though they're required to do a little bit of that. But you try to simulate game situations as much as possible, which means full speed ahead. Quarterbacks, of course, will be wearing black. They're not supposed to get hit. But past that, you want the defense giving its all against your offensive receivers and your offensive line, and seeing how quarterbacks handle pressure, how they handle reads, how they handle hitting guys on the dead run, which, if you saw Alabama last year, that was really the difference in that football team to anybody else, is how good Mac Jones was hitting that great fleet of receivers on the dead run. Everybody's looking for that kind of like speed quotient in their offense. And the only way you do that is going full speed. I've equated it many times, Dom, to race car drivers testing. The only way you know how fast a car can go is if you put it to the limit. And I think Ryan Day and his staff are going to try to do that as much as possible this spring.
And the other thing, Tim, Ryan Day told me is that unlike in other years, they got about 100 guys on the team right now, 100 guys that will be there. That's going to allow for more competition from the standpoint. It sounds like, they're going to protect the quarterback, but it sounds like it's going to be a physical camp that they're going to get after.
Well, think about what they got to sort out. They got to get a nose tackle, man, to replace Tommy Togiai. Of course, they had a couple of guys try to do that in that game against Alabama. They were pretty much lacking there in terms of pressure right up the gut, the A-gap, et cetera. So you got Antoine Jackson, Jerron Cage, and a few other guys who are going to be really trying to show they belong on that starting defensive line. You got a couple of defensive ends in Zach Harrison and Tyreek Smith who still really need to prove themselves on a consistent basis. You're replacing all three linebackers. You're replacing basically 2 out of 4 starters in the secondary, but then Josh Proctor, they've already declared he's pretty much going to be working at that free safety position in the spring, which I think is a good position for him if they still turn him loose every now and then. But you look at all those positions they're replacing or resizing on the defensive side of the ball. This is an incredibly important spring. That's why keep telling everybody, if they, if we do get to watch the spring game, you might see 80 or 100 passes thrown in it, because this is a team that needs to prove it can throw the ball with a new quarterback and sort of reshuffle deck at receiver, and obviously needs to show it can defend against the pass. It could be a real Donnybrook April 17.
Tim, last thing, they don't rebuild there. Everyone expects them to reload. With that said, last time we saw this team in action against Alabama, that is the gauge. Urban Meyer talked about how Alabama was the chase. That was the team they were chasing. Ryan Day went up against them. What did he learn about his team? How big is the gap? And what do you think he implements this spring to narrow that gap?
Alabama was a complete offense. I'm not sure you're going to see even Alabama be as good as it was a year ago this coming season. So chasing that, might be kind of like chasing your tail. Clearly, Ohio State wants to be that kind of offense, and they want to be that kind of defense, a defense that can make big plays. As Kerry Combs, the defensive coordinator, pointed out on the telecast the other day, or teleconference the other day, they only lost one game last year. That is true. They lost that game, though. Alabama took advantage of exactly what was wrong with Ohio State defensively, which meant it couldn't defend the pass on a consistent basis. Definitely Ryan Day wants to see that fixed, and that could be fixed in two ways. Number one, more consistent pressure up front, and maybe better coverage in the back end, maybe a little bit better scheme, or a scheme that suits your personnel. I think that's what he's looking for more than anything else. This defense, Dom, when you look at the receivers on board, when you look at the running backs who are coming back, and a couple of running backs who are new on campus, not the least of whom is Travion Henderson, this team is going to have some offense one way or the other, a great group of offensive linemen, but they got to get that defense sorted out for sure.